So the activity we're working with now, and some of this demonstration will be done in class. I just want to highlight some of the parts that you may have find more complicated, so you can go back and look at this demonstration again. We're making a set screw that goes into two different types of thread locations. So the things that we're going to gain, learn through this are, most obvious is going to be brazing. We have to braze the nut to the flat stock, and we also have to braze a bolt into this piece of 3/8 square stock. Number two is, we're going to talk about tap and die sets, pre-drilling and putting threads in. We're going to put threads into the actual metal 1/8 inch thick material, so that can be threaded into that. That is a useful thing to know going forward. It'll also help with, when you've buggered up a thread, how do you realign those threads so that bolt can work again. A lot of times we have specialty bolts and things that are not that easy to find again. So being able to rehab them is an important thing. We're also going to be using the hacksaw, so we're going to learn how to use the hacksaw for this and go with measurements. So I'm going to work on this piece right here. I want to find center, and I want to show you how we're going to cut out an area that's going to be able to allow for this bolt to fit inside there. So the material gets clamped in the vise because that's the easiest way to work with it. I don't have to worry about how I'm going to hold it and so forth. And I'm going to grab a square. Grab this square here. I have a few different types. This one will work well for this. Holds on there pretty well. So I want to find center of this. This is 2 inches, according to the plans that I gave you, 2 inches long. I'm going to mark it at 1 inch. Then I'm going to mark to each side of that, whatever half of the width of this bolt is. So when I measure this bolt flat to flat, I get 7/16, right? Half of 7/16 is 3.5/16. Or if you have better eyesight than me, you can go to 30 seconds. Half of 7/16 is 7/32. I'm going to go 3.5/16, and I'm going to check and see how that looks using my bolt as a guide. So 1, 2, 3.5. 1, 2, 3.5. With those two lines there, I'll just go ahead and I'll mark them with my square. Now I want to put my bolt on that and see how that looks. So I'm resting it right between those two lines, and it looks like I still see a little bit of the lines on the outside there. So I'm going to try to cut like on the inner half of the lines that I've drawn. Now, how deep do I have to cut? Well, I have to cut to the depth of this head here, the thickness of the head. So I'm going to use one of the marking gauges that we're making in here, and I'm going to set my, I'm going to set my bolt on the marking gauge. I'm going to line it up, and the way I adjust this is by loosening this and bringing this guide forward or away from that point there. And I'm going to set it up so that my point is exactly the thickness of the top of that bolt. Then I can go ahead and scratch that line onto my material. If you notice, the material is very shiny on the end, and then the outside here has like a rougher black finish on it. That is a scaling finish, and it helps to preserve it when it's not being used. So if I have it stored, it's not going to oxidize without scaling the surface on there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scratch a line on that side. I'm going to flip it, put my guide up to it, and I'm going to scratch a line on this side as well. So you see the lines are a little bit shinier. I've gotten through some of that scaling. Okay. Put that back in there. And I'm going to use my hacksaw to cut this line and this line down to that line. So this time I'm cutting it, I'm not going to be angled. I'll angle maybe a start to bite in the material, but I'm going to cut down to flat there. My safety glasses on. And I'm leaving a little bit of that line to the side what I have there. So I want to look at that and see how far I've gotten to that line that I scratched. Looks like I'm there. Now I'm going to the other side. Shit in my place, so I'll bring that back up and tighten it. again, and I talked about this in class already, but we hold the hacksaw here. We don't hold our hand over the top here. And we don't go, if we're going through a piece, very aggressively. If it's over top here, when you go through and the saw drops down, your hand can run over top the burr that's been created by cutting metal, and that can cut you. And if you're going too fast at it, you go through and eventually you're going to bang your knuckles onto the burr again and cut yourself that way. So there's two places where you're going to have your hand using a hacksaw. In the front, opposite end, or over top the hand you have. I prefer using the opposite end. Okay, so I want to take out that middle square. I'm going to do that by making a series of cuts. So I'm going to keep cutting as close as I can to the last cut, trying to remove material. So you can see I made a series of cuts on there. But now I'm going to cut sideways and try and take them off in that direction. So I have a lot going there. Now I'm going to come back and cut this direction with my saw in this direction. So I angle the opposite way. Okay? So let's see how that looks. Looks like my bolt is a hair wider than what that is. So I want to bring that out a little bit. So I want to find a file that's going to be able to get in there for myself. I'm going to grab the metal files. I'm going to use this file just to kind of, remember this file has cutters on the edge and the faces. So I'm just going to take the side out a little bit on that side and square up on this side too. Once I have it looks nice and square, I'm going to see if that has done what I want to do. And you can see, just with 3 passes here and 3 passes there, now this bolt fits in there nicely and it's snug. It still needs to be a little bit deeper, but it's not flush on the top there. So now I'm going to focus on the down. So my thumb goes on the file and it holds it down as I make my cut. If you're noticing, this is not a type of thing. I'm making deliberate passes to remove material. All push stroke cutting. next thing I want to look at here, and bring the camera in the sideways here, I want to center it on there, and I want to bring it down so that I can see that my piece is not leaning in either direction. I want it to be straight up and down. So right now it feels like it's rocking a little bit in there. So I want to find out what the reason for that is. I'm going to open it up, and I want to see exactly what it looks like here. So I can see that I'm not as deep on this side here as I am on the other side. So I want to focus there a little bit. Same thing is true over there. I enjoy this portion of the project because you can see who really takes pride and who cares about what the product is going to look like at the end, and who just wants to get through this. Okay. That looks pretty nice. Let me see how that looks with this. Looks fairly square on there. One thing I am noticing, if you come to this side where the light's behind you and look through the gap below the bolt, it looks like my corners didn't get squared out of the way. So I want to go back with a file that's going to be able to square those out. So if I take this out, and what I mean by that is in the corner here is a little bit of a round, and over here the corner here is a little bit of a round. So I want to find a file that maybe has a steep angle. And get rid of that corner there. On a nice crisp angle for that bolt head there. So I'll set that in there again. And that sits down on top, as it is now. Okay. Last thing that we want to do is we want to get the codes that are off of this. So bolts are rated in terms of the weight that they can handle and their usefulness, what they're used for. So all these have a code, and that's what that means. And the lines on there, the 3 dashes that we see, they're also part of that code. So we want to file those off. What I'll do for this is I'll drill in a piece of wood, a diameter hole. In fact, let me show you that right now. I'm going to get a piece of wood, I'm going to get a drill and some bits, and I'm going to screw this in so I can vise the wood in here. What I don't want to do is I don't want to booger up these threads on this. So I'll take a piece of wood, I'll put it in this vise. Another way of doing a similar thing would be if I were to put a nut on here and then clamp the nut. But instead I'm going to go ahead and get a drill and a bit, drill into this, and I'm going to thread this in so I can file the top off. So I'm going to get a drill, let me show you where they are, just turn with me, don't follow. Here. And I'm also going to get my nut drivers. This is a 1/4-inch bit, or a 1/4-inch bolt. So I'm going to go a little bit less than that, 7/32. Then I'm going to drill a hole into this piece of wood. Now I'm going to find the nut driver, 7/16 nut driver. I'll put the bolt up into this. push down as I rotate this, trying to get this bolt thread into that hole. So you see how that's tight in there. And I can go ahead and thread that a little bit further too. So now what I want to do is to get rid of those markings, I'm just going to take my file. We're achieving two things in doing this, by the way. We're getting rid of those markings so that it'll sit flat on our piece, on our key there. But we're also cleaning it up in the process of doing that so that our braze is going to hold better. If you recall back at the soldering assignment, the cleaning of the metal was extremely important. I mean, it will fail without that. So now I'll set that in there. Sits nicely, sits square. Next thing to do is to clamp it up and braze it.